Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. How are you this morning? Good morning to you. Pray you're doing well. On this sunny day, it looks like winter might actually be giving up, and there's some beauty in the days. It's already breaking, pushing towards 70 degrees, and we may actually have a summer yet. Good morning. Hope everybody's doing all right. Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Good morning. Hello, gang. Good. Hello, hello. All right. Let's get going this morning. It is the third day of June here at 11:11 on this Tuesday, and I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're a part of the journey. This weekend, the uh, city of Fall River had the chance to celebrate its little piece in the American Revolution. That we began. They had a reenactment down on the waterfront around with which was a tip of the hat to the Battle of Fall River, which in 1778 uh, was right here on the waterfront at on May 31st. So the actual day they did a little reenactment of the battle. It was a fun day. It was really kind of neat things, but it got me thinking about this whole notion of rebellion and what how we Americans we celebrate this. We celebrate this rebellion against tyranny, this rebellion against the crown, and this way that those soldiers that put ashore here were repulsed and pushed back. They did get to burn. They burned the mill down. They burned a couple houses, but there was a stiff of enough fight by 16. That's all there was. 16 um, uh, patriots of the Revolution that resisted the coming ashore of this little foraging party of British soldiers. Uh, Two of those actually would come to be a few years later founders of this church. So we are quite literally a church founded in rebellion, as is the Congregational Way. We are founded in rebellion. We are. It's part of what our very identity, our very DNA. However, when we start to look at Bible and we start to look at this notion of understanding rebellion in Bible, it's not always quite as exciting or as good or as maybe as hopeful as we think. We think about rebellion as this way of pushing off the yoke of oppression and being able to govern ourselves, to govern our own affairs with God and with humanity, without this king figure in the middle. And that's our hope, and that's our endeavor. But in Bible, when we often find rebellions, we often find them as problematic and as ways in which that God has to kind of cut off pieces of us. Because really, if we look in our spiritual lives, when we talk about rebellion against the world, that is an exciting and beautiful thing, because the world, meaning kind of the passions, these things that, these impulses that will take us all manner of awful places, these rebellious instincts within us, that to eat all the things, or to desire all the things, or to control all the things, those things, they always will take us nowhere good. But when we speak of rebellion to God, now we find ourselves in trouble. So there, in Numbers, there is one of the famous rebellion stories of the Bible. It is called Korah's rebellion. It happens in Numbers 16. It's kind of a long passage, so I don't read it for you. But what happens is Korah and a bunch of people are just tired of Moses' leadership, because kind of things are hard under Moses. They've left slavery. They're out in the wilderness. Here they are in the wilderness, and they're eating manna and they're eating pigeons. But it's not the flesh pots of Egypt. It's not all the good land of milk and honey, as they describe it, that Egypt was. Even though they were in slavery, they still long back for the yummy goodness that was their time in Egypt, and so they rebel against Moses. And Moses tells them to come to the tent of meeting, and they refuse, the place they're going to meet God. And then he tells them again. He says, "Get over here, because God's going to be present and God's going to be looking for you." And so 250 of all their priests come burning incense. The rebellion's pretty good size. Shows up at the tent of meeting and shows up before God. And God takes a look at them and says, "Moses, get away from them." And so he says, "What do you mean?" And Moses and Aaron, he says, separate yourself from them. Don't even touch them. Don't even touch anything, because I'm going to take care of this for you. And Moses looks at Aaron, and Aaron looks at Moses, that doesn't sound good. So there's actually this moment where they prostrate themselves before God and says, God, spare them, spare us, have mercy. Like God says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And Moses and Aaron move away from them, and the ground swallows up all of the priests of Korah, all of the tents of Korah, all of the people of Korah that followed Korah's rebellion. That the ground swallows up everybody and everything, right down to the pet chicken. Like they're all, like, everything goes and is swallowed up by the earth, and Korah's rebellion is no more. Now we look at that story, and we actually think in some ways that there's that kind of what an awful God, what a meanie pants, what a big blue meanie for being out there and swallowing up all these people. They just didn't like living in the desert. Who would like living in the desert? That makes sense. It's awfully hard out here. And they didn't want to, but what the real problem was is they didn't want to submit to Moses' leadership. Now Moses is kind of he's the interface. God is the tent of meeting. Moses goes into him and kind of tells Aaron, and Aaron kind of helps administer things. Moses is this interface between God and between the people. And they didn't want to listen. They didn't want to listen to what God had to say in their life. And this rebellion, and that in it, God ends up swallowing up all of the people who follow Korah's rebellion. One way to look at the story is to say, "Oh, God's a big blue meanie." But really, if we look at it in our own spiritual context, and we look at it in our own spiritual lives, there are things, there are pieces, there are parts of our life, that are in active rebellion to us. And not in active rebellion to a tyrannical king. That is a movement towards the true, the good, and the beautiful. That is a movement towards the true ordering of things, that when we rebel against that which would oppress, but when we rebel against that which loves us, that which is trying to bring goodness to our lives, that when we rebel against the world, those principalities that have hold over us. Remember what they were missing in the rebellion in Korah. They were missing the flesh pots of Egypt. They were missing the land of milk and honey. They were missing all of the tasty things, or all of the feel-good things, if you know what I mean. They were missing all of the comforts. They were missing of the having it their way. They were missing having all the things, even though they were enslaved to those things. Does this sound like a spiritual condition that you've been? Does it sound like maybe somebody who's addicted to something, or maybe somebody who simply doesn't want to tell a hard truth in their life, or doesn't want to give something up, or doesn't? I mean, this is and I'm talking when I talk about somebody, I'm talking about me. Like I'm talking about this. This is a part of the spiritual path is that we're going to have to let go of some things in order to pick some better things up. And we're going to have to kind of rebel against the world in order to be allied with the kingdom of God. It's simply as it is. And so if we hear that, and we can actually look at Korah's rebellion. We can actually look at what happens in this story of the ground coming up and swallowing them up and pulling them down. We can actually look at that story as an incredible piece of God's grace. Then I don't know about you, but I have places in my heart that are just rebellious. I can't fix them. I can get mad, I can have a temper, and I can snap at somebody and not want to, or I can nurture kind of bitterness in my heart. I can kind of say, oh, the people they did that thing, and I can manage up some resentment for just the way things are. Like, oh, why is it going to be like this? It could be easier. It could be better. It could be a little that. But all these little rebellious things, rather than kind of accepting the life that I have, trying to see what God is doing with that life, try to work through it. I can even look at the rebelliousness in my own physicality, like all of my own the desire that is deep inside of me to eat every brownie that God puts in front of me. My staff just got me a beautiful birthday cake. Yes, it's my birthday. Thank you, everybody. I do see the birthday wishes. I'm very grateful. But they put a giant chocolatey, strawberry cakey thing in front of me. Like one of these things. Look at the size of this thing. Oh, I'm going to eat it. But because there's a part of me that wants to eat it. That is, and is that, it's my birthday. I'll be okay. But if I do that every day, but there's a part of me that wants to do that every day. There's a part of me that wants to right? I mean, there's a part of me that wants all those good feeling things and all that. And if I give way to that rebellion, if I let that rebellion take over, like it's going to take me nowhere good. And I can't remove that. I can't. Like I know I can, but what I can do is set the conditions for it. What I can do, just like the story tells us, I can bring that to God, and I can, and that in doing so, God says, I got it. I will take care of this. You just move away from that campsite. And that's part of the instruction of the story. It says God says, hey Moses, hey Aaron, move away from Korah and all their people. Don't touch them because I'm going to take care of this for us. And that that in fact this is an incredible story of God's grace for our spiritual life. Is there's this way in which if we just look away from the things that would possess us. We look away from our rebellious nature. If we just look at something more true, good, and beautiful than our rebelliousness, there is this way that God will come up and take it over and heal us from it. And we don't have to do it as an act of will. We don't have to white knuckle our way through everything. We don't have to, but actually that when we look at these rebellion stories, particularly in the Old Testament, there's this way in which they are these beautiful expressions of God's grace for our life. Now, if you're a part of Korah's rebellion, you probably don't see it that way, but just as the patriots that were on the shore down 252 years ago, 1778, at the falls of Fall River, when they resisted the tyranny of the redcoats, actually created conditions that for more goodness, more truth, more beauty to erupt in this world, to hopefully be a land, at least in aspiration, that is built for justice and that is built for truth and that is built for a way that is not about the tyranny of the tyranny of a monarch, but is the self-governance and the self-regulation of a people. That that was and founded under God. That impulse is not necessarily ours to control, ours to make up, ours to think that, to be a part of, but it is simply ours to separate, put some space from. It's simply ours to hold the line of where we are and of what we know to be good and right and true, to, if you will, as the patriots of old did, simply defend our homes, simply defend what it is we believe is good and right. And that when we do that, just like Korah's rebellion, there's this way that God's love, that God will come and swallow up those things that are seek to possess us. God will come and swallow up those things that seek to overcome us. Because these things that sometimes we look at as drastic or horrible or brutal in the Old Testament have within them the great majesty and the great love of Christ Jesus for us in our spiritual walk. And that's on this, my 56th birthday, heading into my 57th year. I was born at 7 in the morning, so here I am, 56 and a few hours old. So headed into 57, not knowing what that's going to be, with a whole world ahead of me. There is this way that I know, and that I continue to know, that even in the rebellious parts of my being, even in the rebellious parts of your being, God's love and God's provision and God's power is at work. Not just beating you up, because even though it might feel like that sometimes. Not just afflicting you, even though that's somehow it might feel. Not testing you. That's not what God's business is. But carefully and delicately and easily and slowly taking away those things that would lead us to destruction, taking away those things that would keep us from the table that God sets for us, and inviting us closer to Him. And that is the great walk in which our pilgrim's path has set us on, and that is the great invitation that God has for each one of us in the coming year and in the coming of our days. So thank you all for your happy birthday wishes. Let me just say hi to everybody. Hi, Jane. Thank you for happy birthday. Jean, good morning to you. So glad. Deborah, thank you so much for the birthday wishes. Irene, thanks. Happy birthday. Donna, thank you for the happy birthday wish. Vicky, thank you so much. Yvette, thanks. Karen, good morning to you. Everybody, thank you for the well wishes on this my birthday, and I hope you will know God's care and God's power and God's provision for you as on this today and in the days ahead. Peace and grace to you all, and we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.